All right, our last invited talk in this session is by Anja Fourie, who's a project director on broader impacts at NRAO. And she's going to tell us about NRAO's past, current, and planned broader impacts activities.
Thank you very much. It's a gin and tonic, don't tell Tony. Right, good afternoon, everybody. It really is quite a big task to be able to talk about past, current, and planned broader impact activities for an observatory which has been around for quite a while, especially when it's something that one is so passionate about. Broader impacts really is a life's work for those of us who are involved in this. So I'm going to really focus on two things, what the NRAO does really well, and then touch on our plans for NGVLA. So let's go on a journey. If I can get this to advance. Let's see, there we go. Right, so something that the NRAO has done differently to many other institutions right from the start is that broader impacts within the observatory is actually based within the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And in the previous two talks, these are words that you hear a lot when one talks about broader impacts. It's about diversity, it's about equity, it's about inclusion. And doing all of those things with integrity. So our Office of Diversity and Inclusion at the NRAO, we have three main charges. The first is, to ensure that we use our research facilities, for the benefit of society, and that we do that in a responsive way. So what does our community need? And we do that in an ethical way. Of course, one of our big charges as well is to constantly create and maintain a very welcome and appreciative work environment for employees with a diversity of experience, that's personal and professional experience, and always to make sure that our staff are supported. And then finally, within that office sits broadening participation in STEM. And currently within the NRAO, we are primarily focused on BIPOC and LGBTQIA+ individuals. So those three things really work very, very closely together in the work that we do within broader impacts. And so this is the home for broader impacts within the NRAO. So what is broader impacts? And one often assumes, those of us who work in broader impacts know differently, that scientists and engineers just know what broader impacts is, but often they don't. And so, I'm going to touch a little bit about that, but just to say that the NRAO, as an NSF funded, FFRDC, which is, Research and Development Center, we very closely align ourselves with what the NSF defines as broader impacts. And of course, there's best practice that's been built up over the last 10 years, even before that, but officially over the last 10 years, that we like to integrate into broader impacts as well. It's an observatory-wide initiative. So it's not just something that happens in Charlottesville, it happens in Socorro at the VLA, incredible programs happening down in Chile, Green Bank Observatory, so we work on broader impacts with all our partners. I think one of the incredible things done by NRAO is this criteria that broader impacts be involved, integrated into project design. If you have a great idea at NRAO, you better be sure Tony wants to know what the broader impact of that's going to be. And this really makes sure that our scientists, our engineers, all our staff think through, how we can use our facility and the work that we're doing to benefit society. Broader Impacts also has a team. It's led by a project director for Broader Impacts, and that really is not to do all the broader impact work. Most of you are probably doing this already. Few people know that this is a broader impact, but it's really to look at what broader impacts are happening. Be able to coordinate that, be able to monitor that, and be able to decide and plan in advance for how do we measure the impact of that broader impact work. So our vision within NRAO is really to be a diverse and inclusive observatory that's respected in the way that we are responsive, innovative, and ethical in the way that we use our scientific research and our facilities for the benefit of society. And of course, our mission is to make sure that broader impacts is an integral part of the culture of the NRAO, and to constantly make sure that we are a leader and we expect to be held accountable. I think this is part of the magic that happens at NRAO. So many scientists, many engineers will think of broader impacts. I know definitely those that have to write NSF proposals or National Research Foundation proposals in South Africa, as broader impacts as education and public outreach. As you've seen in the previous two talks, it's way more than just that. And so the NRAO has, particular goals within broader impacts that range through, a range of categories. So yes, we do broadening participation. That's probably one of the major goals. But there's collaboration and partnerships. There's economic development, education and workforce development, natural, cultural, and scientific heritage, planetary defense and national security, public engagement with science, and then, of course, technology and commercialization. And for these categories, NRAO actually has, different departments which are specifically dedicated to the work. So we'll have technology and commercialization, we'll have broadening participation within ODI, we have education and workforce development and public engagement with science in EPO, etc. We also have a percentage of time for staff allocated to broader impact. So if they do broader impacts, either they're doing outreach or, they're working on a document or whatever it is, if they're recently had an example of a Navajo staff member who's helping us, with discussion with tribal elders, that counts as broader impact. And so staff not only receive that allocation, but we also like to try to train staff in what is broader impacts, how can you do this, how do you write a proposal, your broader impact section of your proposal, to make sure that this work, is consistently and constantly being done. So the one thing that the NRAO has done really well over the last 10 years is broadening participation. And so what I'll do is just to tell you about 3 of the 8 broadening participation programs that we have, so really our big 3. But these range in everything, from astrophysics to data imaging and analysis. And, recently we now have 3 projects also looking at education in the spectrum, ham radio work, teaching about RF and RFI. So the NAC program is our flagship program, and really what we're looking at there is increasing the number of students, who have been underserved by this traditional academic, what's called pipeline. And by the way, here's your broader impacts education for the day. We don't use the word pipeline anyway, it's now pathways, so make sure you keep up. So making sure that, that those who haven't been served by this system, which is what it's become, really are served by, and what we do is we place them in a cohort with their fellow students. And often one has summer programs, they happen for 10 weeks, the students go away, you never see them again, maybe you run into them one day when they actually become your boss. That's a great outcome. The NRAO consistently works with students. Our saying is once a NAC, always a NAC. You're allowed to participate in the NAC program, more than once. And we like to keep in touch with students. We like to stay involved with our students. We like to invest in our students year after year after year. And so after 10 years of NAC, coming into our 10th year now, there are some success stories, that we've got 90 alumni, 40 who are currently in graduate programs. We've had our first 3 PhDs in astronomy completed, and 3 PhDs coming up this year and next year that actually doubles up to 6. So broader impacts work is slow. It has to be done consistently, but boy, oh boy, when those returns start coming in, you just can't be anything but happy when you start to see the impacts. The national and international non-traditional exchange program. This is our almost international broadening participation arm. Here we look at research and training experiences for students or junior faculty from developing countries where radio astronomy is really starting to pick up. We love this thing called leapfrogging, and if we can allow countries or communities to do leapfrogging, let's go for it. So our current focus is on the Caribbean and Central America. We have a collaboration with AlphaCen, which is a community of, professional community for astronomers in that region. And through that program, which not only lets the student do a technical project, in astrophysics, something related to astronomy, but we also train them in project management, and they walk away with a certified associate in project management qualification. We now have our first student, coming from countries where there were no grad programs, registered for a PhD. 5 offers to another student, from institutions in the United States. One has loved project management so much that she decided to do her master's in STEM project management. And then, the lovely thing about NRAO as well, we want to develop the STEM workforce. So you know what, if you don't go into astronomy, it's also okay. So one of our students has now registered for his master at RADMEP, and he's from Costa Rica. Curriculum development has become a very important part of what we do, specifically inclusive curriculum development. We have found that often from K to 12, undergrad curriculum, even master's level, curriculum doesn't necessarily serve the students, and certainly isn't as inclusive as we'd like it to be. So we've created a portal called Supernova, and no, it's not a spelling mistake. The K stands for knowledge, I'm told. And so this is an open e-learning platform where everything is free and available to students. Currently being prototyped, we have 30 lesson plans for high school. We're working on 6 undergraduate courses specifically related to spectrum. Ham radio in general, courses are on there for students. Our professional development training, so whether it's science communication training or how to open a bank account, that's all there. And then there's work that's constantly under development. So as we, raise funding for the work we do, which is, incredibly well supported by the National Science Foundation and our recently foundations such as the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, we keep developing this material. So let's talk about the NGVLA. Well, we're very lucky that we are still in what's called the design and development phase. And I'm very glad that, Matthew went just before me. You can probably hear from the accent that no, I'm not American. And I come from South Africa, having previously worked at the South African Radio Astronomy Observatory. And so this for me is the beauty of a meeting like this and the kind of collaborations that we're talking about between SK and NGVLA, is that best practices are there to be shared. And so a lot of what, is being developed for the NGVLA, a lot of those best practices, we've turned to SKA and said, damn, that team in South Africa did a really good job, with the broader impact work that they're doing. What is it, that can be borrowed, the kind of projects, the kind of impacts that large science facilities can make? So currently under development is a separate strategy for broader impacts, which is aligned with the NRAO strategy. And of course, it has to be aligned with project phases. This is a very long-term project. And so currently we are in the design and development phase, so there'll be a strategy for that, a strategy for construction, operations, and even, when we get to decommissioning stage. So, we're looking very far ahead because we have this opportunity to be able to design that, strategy. We believe in collaborative design, and what that means is designing with our communities, no matter who that community is, whether it's the science community, whether it's, a historically Black college or university, whether it's, the Alamo Navajo, whoever that is, has to be involved in the development of the project to make sure that you're not designing something that nobody wants. And so in part of that, is in-depth stakeholder engagement. We look at, we do extensive literature reviews. We have advisory committees for the work that we do. We, constantly working, doing focus groups, using surveys and online engagement, as well as community meetings. So in education and workforce development, just to give you a quick overview, just pulling out one of those particular broader impacts is our current Working with Our Tribal Neighbours initiative. And here I want to give a nod to our Director of Advancement, Heather Cochran, as well as one of our Jansky Fellows, Julia Bluebird, who've been doing incredible work in this, putting together this education and workforce development advisory committee. And some of what we're hearing in these meetings, looks at how do we incorporate Navajo and Pueblo Indigenous knowledge and languages into resources. I think there's, 9 Pueblos, there's 2 Apache tribes and 2 Navajo tribes, just where the VLA is. NGVLA, the last estimate was more than 100, and that's federally recognized. So there's a lot of work to be done here. Developing high school post-secondary, and I say that specifically because it's not just for undergraduate, we're talking technical trades here as well. Graduate student education programs for those students, leveraging existing apprenticeship programs in New Mexico to train local students, establishing formal partnerships within universities in New Mexico. And then, as Tony showed you earlier, one of the current really big projects is building the Next Generation Learning Center. Again, with a lot of community engagement. If we are to build this, how will it be useful to you? Is it useful to you? Do you need it? Do you want it? And what resources should it have? Other potential broader impact projects. And again, here I've just selected a few, from the different categories. You can look at procurement policies, when procuring, whether it's catering or whether you're looking at, your dishes. Business development training in local areas, supply chain development programs in areas. All ways to stimulate growth of specifically minority and women-owned businesses. Improving infrastructure in surrounding towns, when you're upgrading existing or building new infrastructure near a site. Supporting community programs, and NRAO is already doing a lot of this in the Socorro area. So, whether you're talking about supporting domestic violence shelters or performing arts programs, what is it to be a good neighbor and what is it to show up as a good neighbor? Facilitating broadband internet access. This is something else that we've heard as suggestions coming from these meetings. I think we have a responsibility, when we are talking about intergovernmental organizations or when you're talking about FFRDCs with national federal backing, that you are able to leverage your relationships, for example, with SpaceX to say, how do we get Starlink to underserved communities? And so this is the kind of work that's being done. We're looking at monitoring of electromagnetic spectrum usage in New Mexico. Tony referred to that earlier. And then, of course, if there are radar capabilities, let's use that to develop radar knowledge and skills in New Mexico. So that just gives you a very, very quick overview of what has been done within NRAO and what we're looking at NGVLA. And just again, thank you for this opportunity, and please come and talk to all of us during this week. We're here to help.
Any quick questions for Anja before I'm going to bring her right back. You may as well not leave.
My gin and tonic.
Hi, Ned Moulter from UC Berkeley. Thanks for a really nice talk. Near the end of your talk, you were talking about this new outreach building or facility that will be at the New Mexico site, and then you asked some rhetorical questions for the local community. Do you need it? Do you want it? What should be in it? How will it be useful to you? And I guess my question is, can you answer those questions? What are you hearing from those people, and sort of what are the plans for that facility as it stands right now?
Okay, so the quick answer is going to be, if you go onto the NRAO website, there's actually, I think it's under the giving page, Tony, where we talk about the design of the center and exactly what those facilities will hold. But as I said, our Director of Advancement, Heather Cochran, did extensive stakeholder engagement in New Mexico. We're talking about communities, state government, local governments, learners, educators, and so the center is not just going to be your normal visitor center, that has your typical exhibitions and then, the gift shop before you go out because you have to spend some money. The learning center aspect is a very big part of that. So, classrooms and laboratories that can actually be used. We are in the process now of looking at what is, the content, so, of what is going to be done there. But, we're hearing, for example, yes, we would love to use the center, but transport is an issue. Okay, so we know we need to, go outside of government to find funding for, or help schools to find funding for transport. But once they get to the center, these classrooms are very flexible. In terms of how you can use them. They can be used for events as well. But we're looking at everything, as I said, from project management training, ham radio training, hands-on workshops, undergraduate conferences, you name it, whatever it is. If the community says to us, we would really like to have, some skills training in that venue, then, it's our responsibility to work with the community to see how we do that.
All right, thanks. And
Sure.
could you link that page in the Slack, please?
Yes, with pleasure. I'll do it on the community engagement.
Great, let's thank Anja again.